Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is our demo discussion with Daniel and Zach of Orita AI. My name is Professor Adam Plisek from Carnegie Mellon. And in addition to my day-to-day at the Tepper School and the Human Computer Interaction Institute, I'm an advisor here at Orita. But I wanted to walk everybody through in just 10 or 15 minutes the exciting experience that Daniel and Zach have built for us. But before we get into all that fun and we give you the play-by-play to calculate the power of clean data, Zach, why don't you say hello and introduce yourself so everybody can meet your background? So we obviously know you ended up in Georgia Tech and Lehigh in graduate work, but go ahead and say hello, your role in the business, and how you got started.
Sure. Hey, I'm Zach Gao. I'm co-founder of Orita. The past 7 years, I've worked as a data scientist and machine learning engineer. And over time, I've noticed every single company that I've worked for had this issue of bad and dirty data. So we founded Orita as a way to clean this up so people could take advantage of the power of clean data.
Great job, Zach. Thanks so much. And we're going to get really into what dirty data actually means through our demo. But, as Daniel and I joke, right, you can't make good decisions off of bad data. And I think that is universal, whether it's e-commerce or a different type of online business. Daniel, tell us a little bit about your background. Are you a data scientist like Zach, or do you come from a different trajectory?
Oh, I am a machine learning engineer and data scientist now, but I used to be a neuroscientist. So I studied at Berkeley and got my PhD at Harvard in neurobiology, where I studied how the brain learns through experience. And I moved into the e-commerce world because I was really interested in understanding how to use those sorts of analytical tools to understand the human brain in terms of how we interact with our everyday life in the real world.
Excellent. Well, data is only good if it's clean, but it's only usable if everyone understands the purpose. So reminder to everybody listening to this video, you can come and join the demo anytime by going to demo.orita, which is ORITA.ai. So follow along here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and Zach and Daniel will be your tour guides along our adventure. Okay, so DB and Zach, we have found ourselves on the infamous demo site. So thanks so much for all the hard work that went to this. I know that when we started talking, one of the biggest problems with data products or data as a service is that most of the business and strategy thinkers have not been as hands-on into the engine room of their data. So maybe, DB, you could tell us in 20 or 30 seconds or less, what's the demo all about? Like, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to generate data? Are we using our own data? Are we trying to see the power of Orita AI? What's the plan here?
Yeah, so basically what we're going to do is we're going to ask you to enter in a few numbers that maybe approximate the way that your current company is operating in terms of how large it is, what sort of sales numbers you have. And then we're going to generate a bunch of data that represents that sort of company, and you can see how messy that sort of information is. Then we're going to go through and clean up the data on our hand using the algorithms that we developed here at Orita.ai. And then we will see how that impacts some of your most basic and fundamental KPIs that affect your day-to-day business.
Okay, great. So just to say that back to you as the business person in the room, we're going to actually generate a sample of data. I know Zach and I worked quite a bit on figuring out sources and the right kind of data that reflects. We're going to go ahead and intentionally mess it up, right? So we're going to mess with emails or phone numbers or addresses from a variety of sources. And then we're going to run Orita on that dynamically generated data set so we can start to understand what's happening on a weekly or monthly or quarterly basis for e-commerce companies that sell offline potentially, but also have email addresses appearing in CRM systems and email systems. Sound about right?
That's exactly correct.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, let's jump into our demo here. I'm gonna go ahead and click our ambiguously intuited here start demo button and find ourselves on an opportunity to describe our company. So Zach, while I have you on the line, why did we choose Shopify, WooCommerce, or other? I mean, is there only 3 e-commerce engines online, or does it turn out that a lot of these data sets are actually quite similar, and looking at Shopify and WooCommerce will tell us a lot about how we might be able to apply Orita AI?
Sure, like practically, it doesn't matter much which data sets are actually here. We chose Shopify and WooCommerce because they're 2 of the most popular e-com platforms. But if you have a platform that's not listed here, you could use other, and that's totally fine.
Excellent. Yeah, well said. And I think what we're trying to emphasize here is the kind of core value proposition of Orita, while not exclusive to e-commerce, really does wonders for the complexity of having a Shopify, Woo, or other online retail experience with other platforms that we're going to illustrate in a second, like, of course, Square or email clients like Klaviyo. So DB, it looks like we have some choices here. Let's go ahead and walk through this slide. What I think I want to do, and keep me honest here, is choose which of these are closest to the online store that I use. So I'm going to choose Shopify because I have attempted to sell, like the shirt I'm wearing, apparel from time to time. Now, tell me a little bit about why I'm choosing the number of unique purchasers in an average year.
Well, what we're trying to get a sense here is approximately the size of your e-commerce company. And so there are different ways in which how large it is can affect the messiness of your data. So we'd like you to get a sense of like, how many customers do you think you have? How many customers do you service in a year? And then we will see downstream how that affects a bunch of other KPI metrics.
Okay, well, excellent. Well, historically, I had less than 10K, but actually this year I had over 100K on my fictitious Shopify site because of some of the global issues that we are all facing and the move to e-commerce. So I'm going to go ahead and, after I've chosen Shopify and highlighted that square, choose 100K. And now that I have Shopify and 100K, I'm going to move on to my next data source. So Zach, we talked about online sales. I'm seeing some different logos here. I see Square, Lightspeed, and potentially other. What does this represent as far as data?
So this is basically the same thing as the previous slide, except in this context, it is just for like retail stores, point of sales.
Okay, excellent. So if I was, for say, selling stuffed animals at a local arts and crafts fair, let alone custom candles in Brooklyn, some of my sales are, of course, going to be through my Shopify site, maybe 100,000 plus per year, but I might actually have, 10,000 or slightly less Square transactions, meaning people that have physically in the real world swiped, but at that same time created an order very similar to Shopify with an email address and a phone number. Does that sound about right?
That sounds perfectly correct.
Okay, perfect. So let's go ahead and click Square or Lightspeed. I'll choose Square because they were the original people that peppered me with direct mail and those readers that worked, all the time, I promise, for those of us out in the field. But I'm only going to choose less than 10K records because actually brick and mortar is a secondary capability of mine. I'm going to go ahead and click next. And what's interesting now is I have a totally different type of data that Orita can work on here. So I have Klaviyo. So DB, tell me a little bit about why we're including, an email capability as well in the type of data. How does that compare to Shopify or Square, like I just selected?
So in terms of the way that you use it day to day, obviously a marketing platform is significantly different than e-commerce. But the underlying information that you have about the people that are on either platform is pretty similar. And so therefore we can process all of that information in quite the same way. But it allows us to kind of power and beef up your entire system by looking for connections across all of the different ways in which you use data, which can range from the actual sales itself to the marketing that you do.
Okay, excellent. So just to say that back to you, if I choose Klaviyo as a potential email capability that I have, and maybe choose 100,000 leads that I process in my system, what I'm really getting at is a couple fold. One, I now have a third data source that I'm going to compare and contrast to the first two to spot when maybe somebody is abusing emails, or maybe to use as a North Star to correct other email addresses, or even a key between my offline and my online store. Am I still on the right track?
You're absolutely on the right track.
Okay, perfect. And then as I change, like what if down the road I choose MailChimp? Am I just restricted to Klaviyo, or is this just an example for the time being?
Once again, like with the other data sources we looked at previously, it is completely up to you what you select. So we just use those as examples, but if you just if you have another data source that you're using, you can just click other instead.
Okay, great. All right, so let's keep on with our adventure. So I've chosen an online retail, I've chosen an offline point of sale system, and I've chosen an email client. Moving on with my demo, I see the infamous CRM and this cloud that we've all come to know and love, like Salesforce. But how should I think about CRM? I mean, isn't it going to have the same email addresses as my Klaviyo and my online point of sale, or is there something different about CRM that we use the data for?
Well, for the CRMs, these are the ways in which customers are talking to you maybe throughout their entire experience. Maybe they're talking to you about their returns or complaints that they've had, and they're not necessarily going to be using the same exact information of when they placed the order or when they wanted to subscribe to some sort of marketing campaign. So while they might be represented across all of your different data sources, the actual specific information that they have in your CRM could be different. And so therefore, it would be useful for us to take a look at all of it.
Okay, interesting. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and choose Salesforce. And because they might be running some sort of an online conversation or platform like a Zendesk does, as well as others, I'll go ahead and leave that to 500,000 records, because more than perhaps the total number of customers or orders I have is represented in my CRM. Fair enough?
Yes, sounds great.
Okay, so we've chosen just 4 of the potential data sources we can have here. Zach, are you excited to keep on going?
Sure am.
All right, so let's keep on moving it. Now, we are in the infamous phase where you have to make a decision if you want to make a fictitious company or a real company. So we've chosen a couple of data sources. As we know, a variety of folks may or may not have email yet at scale or CRM, but probably have some point of sale system by default. DB, walk me through these 3 valuable points that I can enter and tell me a little bit why I'm putting them in to generate more accurate data to understand the potential ROI of Orita.
So what we're trying to look at here is to get a little bit of a sense of how your customers are purchasing on your system. And this allows us to track things like their lifetime value and their average number of purchasers. And that gives us a sense of when you have your data messy versus clean, what sort of difference I can have in those sorts of things. So the 3 points that we'd like to look at are, what are the average number of orders that each customer makes per year? Do they make 2 orders a year? Do they make 12? And how valuable are those orders? Do they make a purchase for $50? Are they spending $1,000 every time they order? And then finally, we also like to get a sense of how long do customers stick around on your platform? Are they only there for a couple years, or are they there for their life? They're there for 10 or 20 years.
Okay, great. So let's kind of put some rubbers to the road here. Let's figure out. So, okay, average number of orders. Let's say we're using a cosmetic company. So let's say probably every other month, maybe I'm looking at making a purchase. And when I spend, let's say I spend somewhere around the neighborhood of $45. And, generally speaking, I think that my customers trend with me for 3 to 4 years. All seem realistic?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And there's no right or wrong answer, right? So, ultimately the data is what the data is. And if we don't know something like how long our lifetime or average customer years is going to be, let's just use our best guess and not get stuck on this. Because again, all we're trying to do is estimate here. Now, one of the interesting things that I learned really early on when we were doing it this at scale was, a lot of these numbers are reported out of some of your point of sale systems, like average order or number of times per year. But the big aha that I had with Orita is how we can have a single LTV or CAC or any of the other kind of key drivers or indicators here across all your platforms. Have you found that to be the big unlock for all of your customers, where now we have a single set of data, no matter where the sale came from, normalized and deduped?
Yes, that's exactly correct. We've noticed that a lot of companies, especially those that have both brick and mortar and e-commerce, that they've kind of lived in 2 siloed worlds where their teams that handle each one don't really speak to each other. But having a deduping practice that allows you to see all the customers together at one point allows you to get a global picture of your company.
Well said. All right, well, let's see what this leads us to. Okay, now Zach, this is your favorite slide. So I'm going to mouse over our 3 things. This is the anti-Orita, as I like to think of it, right? The kryptonite to your data. So, what happens more often than not is there's this evolution of, you're new, and so the data has certain types of problems. We have 3 big sections. So let's start at baby steps here, Zach, and I'm going to mouse over here so everybody can kind of see. Walk us through how we should think about using the baby steps filter to kind of mess up the data so we can understand if there's ROI from Orita.
Sure. Yeah, the idea with the baby steps choice here is more along like maybe you're a newer company, you're just starting out, maybe you are only using one type of system. Maybe you have an e-commerce platform, but you don't have a separate point of sale system yet, or you don't have a marketing tool yet.
Okay, well said. So the way I should think about, if you want to see if your representative for Orita here is, hey, I'm pretty new to Shopify. I have some email or CRM, but not a ton. And frankly, maybe I don't have that much complexity in my purchase habits, or maybe I'm a bulk order or relatively episodic and not every other month. Now, if I want to assert the growing pains, chaos, how is that different than baby steps?
In this case, you're using more different third-party services. Maybe you have higher order volume, you have more customers now, you have customer information spread across these different systems. So now as your data becomes more and more complex, it's just messier.
Okay, and maybe there's a seasonality nature, right? Like a lot of your sales, like back to schools or swimming suit season, as you put here, kind of makes sense. And now, what if we want to put on the whole "your life is messy" moment? What are we really saying, when we apply this filter?
When it comes down to it, is you have errors all over your system. You have tons of typos across different sources, wrong emails, promo code abuse, tons of different accounts in all of your systems, and realistically, no easy way to clean that up and reconcile all of it.
Okay, so maybe I'm a business that has grown through acquisition. Maybe it's that I have recently offered new products. Maybe I'm offering seasonal and first-time customer benefits and all sorts of other mix and mingle. So let's go ahead, now that we've oriented, I'm going to go ahead and choose growing pains because I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm aspiring to be baby steps, but I'm probably somewhere in here in my cosmetic company. I'm going to generate sample data. Now, DB, what's happening behind the scenes since I've clicked this? Oh, it looks like I already have data, but walk us through if we were to sort of put it in slow motion.
Yeah, so what we've designed is a bunch of mathematical models that actually take all of that information that you put in previously and generates a bunch of fake customers and then also their order behavior. And some of those customers make fake accounts and duplicate accounts and trying to trick the system. But we essentially generated 2 years of fake customer data based on what you just put in.
Okay, and just to be clear, you didn't have this data sitting around. So based on the custom inputs that I put in versus Shopify versus Square, versus a variety of other choices, you've actually generated those volume and the messiness and the variety of records, just what we picked so far.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so DB, walk me through what I'm seeing here. I mean, I think some of it's intuitive, but maybe tell me the difference between e-commerce orders and retail orders, just to clarify.
Yes, so what we're having here is just a basic look at what you might see on your different platforms. How many orders did you do over the last 2 years by quarter? And so that's what we see here. We can see how many e-commerce orders there were. So there's a little bit over 1 million in e-commerce sales. And since you're just getting started with your brick and mortar sales on Square, you have about 80,000. And that combined together, that leads to a total revenue of around $60 million. And you can look at the charts below to show month over month, or quarter over quarter rather, of how fast your revenue has grown.
Okay, excellent. So we see revenue projections, we see growth. Now, obviously, this is only an academic example to show the value, but I think it gives us an understanding of what our Acme Cosmetic Co. sort of starts from. So let's go ahead and keep on moving. We're going to go ahead and find ourselves, in the demo, not only now processing a variety of pieces, but looking at a high level of what could have gone wrong. Okay, so we saw the number of records, that were in and out there across nearly $60 million of sales, but now we're seeing a variety of other numbers appear here. So Zach, tell me a little bit about how I could see over 2 million misspellings, abbreviations, partially completed fields. I mean, is that a lot or a little from what you've seen over the last 10 years?
It's in line with what we've seen. Again, like in this circumstance here, based off of our inputs, we said that the data was in that, typically messy region. We chose 4 different data sources, and some of those data sources, we had, hundreds of thousands of records in there. So across all data sources, it's not too surprising that this many misspellings might be there.
Excellent. And I'm seeing a little bit of an example here highlighted below in my Shopify tab. So I noticed that Bownin is part of Zachary Bowman at Lewis Inc. from Lewis Inc. here that ordered from Woodbridge, Washington. But we can already see how that's happening. Potentially a misspelled last name, a gap in a first name, a partially completed first name, as we see from Cynthia. Now we see that there's 305,000 plus email addresses, burner accounts, or alternative phone numbers. What is a burner account?
So what that means is that they basically have created a temporary email account to kind of trick your system, maybe to take advantage of some sort of promotion, or they don't really want you to have the primary email address. And there's specific signatures that you can see to have that. So if you were to scroll around, you might notice a bunch of different email addresses that are very similar to each other. And those would actually suggest some sort of burner account. And as you can see here on the bottom, we have representations of all the different data sources you have. And these are the actual fields of data that you would get if you exported out your data. So we've kind of formatted it to look exactly the same as if you exported your Shopify customers data or your Square customer data as well.
Okay, so perfect. So I noticed here that DB, as I scroll down, I see here that, Sarah Jacobs has some highlighting here, and I'm seeing some purple over here, which kind of leads and lines up with the purple coding I have of over 2 million records of incorrectly formatted addresses. What are you actually checking for, in these various boxes?
Well, as you know, a lot of times we don't necessarily write our addresses consistently. Do we use apartment? Do we use number? Do we use suite? All these sorts of things. Do we abbreviate street or not? All those sorts of things can lead to slight differences in the actual way in which it's written, but we all know that they represent the same thing. However, you know how difficult it is to try and match those sorts of things up in Excel. And so these are the sorts of things that we can highlight immediately and take care of.
Excellent. Perfect. And if I click over to Salesforce, I can see, again, a variety of sort of representative data. We would encourage everybody else to kind of look along the way. Again, orange means potentially a burner account or sort of a modified plus sign account, right? That wouldn't obviously extend the number of inboxes, but would certainly extend the amount of promotional offers that were given. We see a variety of kind of orange and overlay around potentially misspelled first names against kind of common dictionaries and lexicon. And purple, we see a variety of kind of hygiene issues around things like phone numbers and the like. So want to encourage everybody to go ahead and understand a little bit here at this point of the demo in our sample data about just how fast and easy it is to make bad hygiene. And what that leads to is, I'm guessing, DB and Zach, is the same person being counted as an individual. Is that the big aha moment?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. So right now you might be using one piece of information or two, maybe an email address as a way of saying, like, you know what, this is the exact same person. But if someone makes 10 burner accounts, well, then you're going to think they're 10 different people. And same with their phone number or their address or any of those sorts of information. So what we're going to try and do is figure out how to connect all these pieces of information together and say, actually, you know what, this is just Zach, or this is just Adam.
Well said. Okay, so step one then, where we got to this point, is we got to get to the infamous kind of dedupe the data button, right? And I'm assuming now what's happening in the background is all of the software that you've written, as we can see from the highlights here, is first and foremost just cleaning the data. Is that a fair way to look?
That's correct. What we do is we clean the data, we standardize it, we get rid of any sort of punctuation or stuff that's not necessary, and then we validate it. Are these real phone numbers? Are these real addresses? And then we go and we project and we do a bunch of machine learning and graph theory in order to figure out exactly how all this information relates to specific individuals.
Okay, makes perfect sense. Now, Zach, we obviously, thanks to the speed of Orita, have deduped our syndicated data here, and I'm seeing almost 4,000 duplicate accounts. Zach, like, what does that actually mean?
It ultimately means you have fewer real life people in your system than you actually do.
Oh, okay, I see. So actually, over 3.5%, round towards 4% of the people that I think are individuals, like DB was saying, are actually the same people?
Yep, exactly.
Okay, and I guess it's almost worth saying that, the caveat here is that not everybody is a promo abuser or an overly loyalist, right? I mean, I guess this could happen if I saw you in real life and I happen to live in Brooklyn and buy your candles or your towels, right? And then I actually followed up when I happen to be online in my machine and buy, from your Shopify site.
That's correct. Exactly.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so we've already spotted nearly 4,000 people that we can market to and manage to differently, but let's actually dive into the impact here of what we have. So first and foremost, we have the infamous paying customer chart. So DB, what am I actually seeing here?
So what we're now trying to take a look at is the difference between how many accounts that you have on your system, which probably up until this point, if you haven't run any sort of deduping, is how many customers that you actually think you have. But then after you run our deduping algorithms and you figure out these are the actual people on there, you can see how many real people you have on your system.
And I guess it's worth it to say, right, that less customers is not necessarily a universal bad thing, right? It might express more loyalty in segments you didn't know you had. Fair enough?
Absolutely, that's correct.
Okay, so step one is after we've cleaned up our data from one or more sources, the simple truth is, well, how many people are duplicate, right? And then what does that tell me about my actual customer growth? Because if I'm thinking about spending on acquisition or channels, right, I probably want to know how many actual people I'm getting. Now, are these customers every month, or are they compounding customers? Or are these just some number of people that have purchased every 30 days? Like, how should I think about the definition of customer here?
For this one, we've actually using your cumulative customer. So this is the growth of your customer base over the entire time of your company.
Okay, perfect. So it's fair to say that we started with, let's say, 50,000 customers in October 2019. And then in, let's say, January of 2021, I actually thought I had closer to 90,000 customers, but I might have actually been closer to like 86,000. Is that the right way to think about it?
That's exactly the right way to think about it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so step one is figure out who's actually paying me, how loyal they are, and how my customer growth has either happened or not happened, and seasonally or otherwise over time in a cumulative fashion. Now, I guess if I'm reducing out customers, that changes things about the purchase habits. So DB, maybe talk me a little bit through about what I'm looking at now.
Well, as you know, the number of orders that you had is the same. So that doesn't change no matter how messy your data is, but the number of customers that are actually placing those orders is different. So as we would expect, your repeat purchase rate is actually higher than you think it is. So instead of it being around 51%, so it's actually more like 52 to almost 53% that are actually purchasing 2 or more times.
Okay, got it. So now across all of my channels, I actually understand how many people are one and done, how many people are coming ultimately, frequently, or occasionally, right? And then how many people are in my heaviest or kind of deepest loyalty bucket as well.
That's
all right.
Exactly right.
All right, well, let's keep on going. Okay, now I'm seeing here that your customers are more valuable than you think. So is this positive? Am I getting good news now, even though that I have less customers?
Yeah, it's one of the most unintuitive things about data deduplication. You get a little bit afraid that you see that you have less customers than you think you do, but the reality is that they're actually more. That means that they're more valuable than you think they are. So here we see what the lifetime value is, and so you might think that your customers are worth around $1,000, but in reality, they're actually worth more around $1,100 as well. So everyone's a little bit more valuable.
Okay. Now we have to, of course, balance that with our customer acquisition costs being a little bit more expensive. But I guess as long as we watch that LTV to CAC ratio, we should be on our plan. All right. Well, this is exciting. Okay. So now I'm seeing some new logos, not to marketers, of course, and any online shoppers, but I'm seeing Facebook and Google and Reddit and TikTok. I thought you guys were just deduping my data. What's the connection here with how I am using these various logos?
Well, so what we also wanted to include was to figure out how did the customers find you in the first place. So for all your first-time customers, we assign a potential source of how they found you. Did they find you through a Facebook ad, Google, on Reddit? And so what we have seen here is that because you thought your customer base was actually a little bit different than it really is, that who you think are your most profitable marketing channels is actually different. So in this case, we see that more people actually come to Facebook through your Facebook ads than you think they do, and less come through Google.
Now, you don't have a magic way of getting all this data. So just like the downloads you would need from Shopify or the CRM, I'm assuming someone would have to give this to you as well?
Exactly. So this is like, we basically, in this case, assume that there was some sort of UTM or source that was assigned to all these sorts of orders. So when you sent us, when we generated that fake data set, we also included those sorts of attributes as well.
Okay, good call out for everybody listening that those types of attributes and kind of metadata have to be available in the process, but don't see TikTok, Google, or Facebook going anywhere anytime soon. So hopefully history won't make me wrong, as well as Reddit. All right, so now you've gotten into the inventory, I'm guessing, of what has become maybe my second incarnation of an apparel company. What am I looking at now?
So what you're looking at now are, what are your most popular products that bring in your first-time customers? And this is great because it's like, what are you going to have on that homepage? What are you advertising in those marketing campaigns? Well, if you looked at a bunch of your first-time customers and you thought that they're buying some sort of shirt or sweater as their primary driver, but actually it's this t-shirt instead, or this polo, then that might change your entire marketing campaign of what you show to get those new customers in the door.
Yeah, it's a really interesting opportunity to learn here. I mean, what I like, Zach and DB, is the idea of like, I think I know what my welcome mat needs to be, right? But then I find that there's a ruthless prioritization because you only have so many carousel moments or pop-ups or pop-ins or whatever the case is these days. And inherently, something that might be a better first time purchase might be buried, 3 or 4 clicks below the fold. So sounds like we have an opportunity then to not only use deduplication to drive kind of high level top line KPIs to manage our business, but actually do some of our merchandising as well. Now, if we think about wasteful marketing spend, nobody likes to hear that they weren't as effective as they could be. So what's the challenges or sort of what's the opportunity with this type of data?
Well, as you can see here, based on the fact that you've just been spamming some people, sending stuff to their burner accounts or to other phone numbers or email addresses that are not their primary ones, you're leaving a lot of money on the table. And in this case, almost $300,000 worth of marketing budget went to email addresses that people probably don't pay attention to. And we can see here specifically that you sent over almost 150,000 excess emails or SMS messages. And then in this model, we also assume some sort of seasonal catalog. And those sorts of direct mailers are quite expensive. And you sent almost an extra 12,000.
Okay, great. So bad addresses equal bad mailers, right?
Exactly.
Sort of diluted or sort of fragmented email addresses mean, worse and worse attention, which is going to help us understate all kinds of factors, right? The interaction with emails or contents, right? Experiences on TikTok, whatever it might be. So big aha moment for me here was, again, less customers means better understanding of where real interaction is taking place, not just redemption of promos along the journey. So speaking of promos, right, these can add up really quick. What are we saying here?
Yeah, so right now what we're saying is that there's almost 3,000 people who abuse your promo strategy. And in this case, the promo strategy was a welcome 20% off of your first order. And so, that sort of can encourage a lot of new customers in the door, but might kind of suggest to your existing customers, like, why don't I just create a fake email account so I can kind of take advantage of this promotion? In which case that costs you almost $30,000 in sales.
Yeah, well said. So Zach, I know you and I have talked a lot about this. Maybe we should build everybody their own calculator for, per every 1,000 promo abuses, how much money we leave on the table. All I would offer is, I think it sounds really tactical when you think in terms of a $5 or $10 discount, but when you start talking in terms of 10 or 20% of a total order, especially for sort of bring them in the door offers, this can get quite expensive as we lean into major retail events like Cyber Monday or Black Friday or a variety of other things. So missing rewards. This is sort of the other side of the coin, right, DB?
Exactly. So right now, a lot of times people want to have some sort of loyalty programs. Maybe after every so many purchases, or maybe after every $200, you get a little bit something back to your customers to get them to purchase again. And since the information is fragmented across different data sources, or maybe across different email accounts or whatever, there's some money being left on the table for your customers themselves. And so they're not getting their rewards. Maybe some of them are not, who deserved some sort of reward, is not getting it at all. And that really leaves opportunity for some of your competitors to swoop in and take your customers.
That's the point that just rings so true with me is like, you make these material investments, you start building out a collection of tools or cosmetics or mattresses or whatever it might be for your household or as an individual. And then all of a sudden you're actually being underinvested in, and like you leave yourself ripe for that tempting, buy one, get everything now offer from your luminous competitor. So thanks for clarifying the other side of it. So, Zach and DB, obviously lots and lots of interesting things here about Orita. I want to just kind of recap what we've talked about, which is, there's no right or wrong set of data. So whether you're on Shopify or Woo, whether you're using Salesforce or another CRM, whether you're using, Klaviyo or MailChimp, the idea is you're focused on the data, not the tool. You're just receptive to them all. The second thing I like is that, there's going to be actions tangibly about like getting the most correct data, the most accurate data, right? Great data makes great decisions. Bad data makes bad decisions. And the third thing is it sounds like you actually have actionability for a lot of different people inside of an organization or a small team, where you do your promos, how you do your promos, how you build your list, what goes on your website. Any other big takeaways you or Zach wanted to leave me with? DB, I'll start with you.
I think you hit the nail on the head with all those points. Absolutely.
Okay, Zach, anything else you wanted to leave us with? I know we're getting to the end here.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people have no idea how messy their data really is, or how many actual real life customers they have. So, it's great that we have this tool to surface some of those insights.
Excellent. So there's a big opportunity to get in touch. If you haven't already found your way, or you found us through some way on the internet, please stop by Orita Orita.ai. Again, this demo that we've recorded in some version, hopefully constantly getting improved and evolved, is always found at demo.orita.ai, and we'd love to hear from you. Until then, have a great day, and thanks so much, Zach and DB, for all the great conversation.
Thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you.